I am Chris Perrin with the Kansas MTSS project. KSDE actually asked me to come out today to talk to you guys about adaptive curriculum for students with significant delays. In part because I work across the state with districts working on their MTSS structure, but also I do some consultation through KSDE on specialty day schools, residential treatment facilities, where they have a whole lot of students who have significant delays, and kind of how I've given them guidance along the way, and we work with KSDE along the way, kind of provide their guidance as well. So with that, by the way, this is a really heavy topic, and I have 15 minutes, so you're getting the extremely brief version of it. But if you do have any questions, I got an email at the end. You can send your questions directly to me that way. So for objectives for today, I just want to demonstrate the importance of including kids, all your students, in core instruction. Talk about how to use the dynamic learning maps to guide differentiation, modifications, and accommodations for kids. And then finally provide some additional resources for how to adapt general curriculum for students with significant delays. All right, so whenever I go on consultation with district, at some point this conversation comes up where I say, we end up saying something to the equivalent of all means all, y'all. So we always encourage everybody to, all kids should be involved in core instruction. Okay, so typically what happens is I'll say something like, all students should receive core instruction that's aligned with state standards. Okay, to which their response usually is, and understandably so, what about kids with really significant delays in their learning? Okay, so my response to that usually is, students with significant delays can always participate in core instruction with differentiation, modification, and accommodations. And they say, well, how do we teach, basically, to summarize that, how do we teach kids grade level standards when they are significantly below grade level in the first place? So how do you modify to the point, like a 7th grade reading standard, how do you modify it to the point where it's still recognizable for 7th grade core instruction, but still meet the needs of that student? So I'm going to give you the gist here. I basically say it's about inclusion, it's about using the DL. Okay? So really what these people are asking is basically, why should we include kids into all kids into core instruction, and then how do we go about doing that? Very relevant questions, and hopefully in the next 11 minutes I can give you that answer to that. All right, so all the background and inclusion. And actually use the our very own Kansas Special Education process handbook for this. I pulled this quote up because I think it really identifies the whole purpose of including kids into general education, regardless of their ability to actually participate in education. And I think even this morning's talks really hit that point ahead. That there's a whole lot more to general education instruction than just the academic pieces. Okay, like learning those teamwork skills and working on organizational skills. Just because the students below grade level academically doesn't mean they're below academic or below grade level in organization, for instance. So they can absolutely participate in core instruction in their own unique way, right? When I was doing a little bit of research for this presentation today, I happened to search the 239-page process handbook for the term general education or general curriculum, and it popped up 74 times. So do you think that the state of Kansas would like you to include all kids into general education? Absolutely. If they mention it every 3 or 4 pages, it's always about how do you include those kids. It's a right for those students to be involved in that core instruction. All right, so how does it look with an MTSS structure? And I'm going to frame it that way, knowing that not all of you guys have an MTSS structure for your core instruction, but I'll frame it that way just for simplicity, right? So this is actually a quote pulled from our a brief that we have on the Kansas MTSS website called Considerations for Replacement Core. Basically saying, if students don't participate in some level of core instruction, it's really difficult for them to close that gap. So it's kind of like if I wanted to play college basketball, right? Surprisingly, as a 34-year-old white guy, I still have 4 years of eligibility at college level. So I could, in theory, go back to college and play basketball, right? But to do that, I'm going to have to stop practicing with my 6-year-old daughter and eventually up my game a little bit to play with actual college students, right? So that I can eventually hit that goal when I'm like 40 years old, right? So that's the whole point for this, right? If you want to play with the big boys kind of thing, you're going to need to at least practice with the big boys as well. And part of that component is mixed in here with, we talk about core instruction and supplemental. You probably can't read that, but the box on the right says supplemental and or intensive instruction. So the big gist here is all students should be participating in core instruction in a meaningful way, regardless of their abilities, right? And that could be, let's just take a ELA example for 6th grade. They're going to participate in that core instruction at 90-minute or 60-minute block of time. But also, in complement to that, they'll receive supplemental and intensive instruction based on their exact skills and a level of understanding of that topic. So that way they still get like for instance, they would still get their IEP minutes met that way. They still work on right goals that way, on the select skills that they're still working on. But they would still participate in core instruction to the maximum amount possible. All right, so I'll hand up one around there, showing you guys the dynamic learning maps. And you guys are probably familiar with this for some of your students who actually take the DLM test at the end of the year. I think we have about 2,500 kids in the state who take the test every year. So I'm going to orient you guys to that web page real quick because this is a really fantastic resource. I'm going to finally talk to teachers about how to pull off that core instruction for kids who are significantly behind grade level. This is like a light bulb that goes off when I show this, right? Is anybody familiar with the learning maps, by the way, off the DLM site? So a handful. Okay, all right. All right, so on the website, go to dynamiclearningmaps.org and go to the corner over here where it says Learning Maps. Click on that. And it's going to pull up that little page. It's going to have the ELA resources, the math resources, and the science resources. Now, what these are, this is fascinating to me. What these are the grade level standards broken down to the intentional level in some cases. Like, can you sort same and different? It gets very, very low in these precursor skills, so it gives you a template for differentiation. So you have an example of an ELA standard, or excuse me, a math standard for high school, a geometry standard actually. So if you look on the front of it, it breaks down the precursor skills, and I'll kind of walk you through that. On the back of that page is a map. The map is way more complicated, but it also kind of, if you're a visual thinker like that, it might help out a little bit. All right, so let me walk you through one. I'm going to walk you through the math version. Click on those maps there. When it pulls up, I'm looking at the high school ones, the essential elements. I'm just going to select that one for geometry shapes. That's the one you have in front of you as well. But I'll walk you through how to use it. So to pull up a document looks like this, which you have, right? So on the far left, right? Yeah, left, you have the grade level standard there, right? And the terminology might be slightly different. This is not written necessarily for Kansas standards. There might be some slight semantic differences, but the numbers and everything line up the same, right? So basically, this grade level standard indicates that students are going to be able to identify shapes and use them to describe objects, right? They're pretty standard geometry skill there. So that standard also drags down over here to the target. And here's the really neat part, right? This is where this really becomes important. These skills above that, sorry. Oh, that's wrong button. Let's try that again. Okay, there, all right, so I'll point with my finger instead. All right, so these, the precursor skills, the initial, the distal, and the proximal precursor, those are all like the sub-skills to that target skill, okay? So what this lays out for you is if you've got a student who is pretty significantly impaired with their disability, right? This is geometry standard, but it breaks all the way down to can they recognize same and different? If they can recognize same and different, they can participate in that lesson in some meaningful way. Okay? And we're having this conversation today about students who are significantly behind, but to me, as a teacher, I think if I've got students who are just a little bit behind, can they meet that proximal precursor, and that becomes your differentiation right there, right? Because another whole other side topic to this is a lot of times we get questions about how do we do differentiation. We have more kids in the core instruction. Well, this lays out every single standard for you right here. Okay. Another really cool feature here is it also has a successor skill to that target skill. So basically saying this is what we're working on now. The successor is when it's coming up next. So if you have those enrichment groups or those advanced learners in your group, they can start to work on that same component, but still be on the same core lesson, right? So pretty darn handy little tool here, right? And again, they're broken down by all the standards for the state for reading, for math, and then the science ones are there, but they're not quite as thorough. They don't have a full map to them, but all the information is there for differentiation within that. All right, so here are some resources for you guys to check out. And again, the special process handbook, the DLM website, as well as our brief talking about the considerations for a core. Oh, in 10 minutes, nice job. Did it in 15. All right, any big questions? That's usually like a half-day training. You did it in 10 minutes. I'm saving myself some time here, but all right. If there are any questions later, or just feeling shy because it's after lunch, feel free to email me, and I'm glad to answer your questions, or direct them to KSDE, who are the real experts, or standards, who were over earlier. But, all right, thank you much.
All right, folks, I'll do some little filling here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mary Ann Perry. I'm the director of CETE, and we are here to talk to you today about assessments not related to what you're going through right now, but assessments that are truly intended to help the learning and to support the teaching of ELA and math and align to our Kansas standards. And hey, I did that just well. My slide came up. Thank you for that. Before I go into this, though, I do want to just take 10 seconds to talk about an elephant in the room, because I hear it came up this morning, but I thoroughly apologize for our service desk. We are making some immediate changes. They worked all weekend last weekend. We're doing some different things right now. It is unacceptable. Understood. It will get better. That's all I'm going to say. Balanced assessment system. So what I'm really here to talk about today is the balanced assessment system. So this is where I wanted to go ever since I first came to Kansas. And of course, the first priority is always to get the summative assessments in place because that's tied to our Title I funding and yada, yada, yada. But what I want to talk about is where we're headed next, which is now we've got the summative assessments in place, we can really focus on ways to help teachers and students in the learning of our new content standards. So I put together this graphic that shows, the summative assessment is really supposed to be just this thing at the end of the year. It is intended to be just a snapshot. It's sort of like just an oil check. Oil check is useful. You need to know if you have enough oil, but it certainly doesn't tell you everything you need to know about your car. The nice thing about what has happened since we started working on this 4 years ago is now the Elementary and Secondary Education Act has been finally, legislators have re-upped that. And it is now the Every Student Succeeds Act as opposed to the No Child Left Behind Act. And if you want to sound like you're a Politico, you call it ESSA. So ESSA eliminated all the punitive consequences. So we get to get away from that thing about you have to do well on this test or our school might be reorganized, or we have to do well or my teacher might be fired. Done. Now we're looking at it to really get an idea of what's going on in our schools, how are our students doing related to the standards, how do we compare across our state, but we get to look inward now and don't need to worry as much about the outward looking. So our goal is really to reduce some of the stress that's been around these assessments the last 10 years, because the goal of ESSA is just to make the summative assessment informative, transparent, but then our inner workings, kind of our inner markets will drive what the stakes are within that. So what we're focused on right now is the interim assessment. And this is what one of the teams, the CAP team, has been working on summative, is now focusing their work on interim, which are meant to be periodic assessments given throughout the year, but teacher choice. One, teachers don't have to use it at all, 2, if they do, they can use it whenever they want, as often as they want, however they want. It's set up with 3 different purposes. We can do diagnostic, give more fine-grained information about what kids know or don't know, weaknesses, misconceptions, lack of understanding. Second, we're about a year away from this, but a little bit more data, we're going to be able to track growth. And one of the things we'll ask from you is the way to track growth is we need kids on the system all year long. This past year, we only had kids starting working on the system around February, so I can't do a growth model when I don't have data from the fall. But this is intended to really be, every item's aligned with the standards. Every item will give you more information. We've polled your teachers and got over 700 responses. We've done a couple of focus groups. We're finding out what reports do you want. So they'll get information about not just which items the kids get wrong, but what does that likely mean about what their either misconception or lack of understanding is. So those reports on this new system will be available this fall. And the third purpose, which will be up in January of 17, is starting around January, we'll give you predictive tests so you can have your kids take it to see how well do you think they'll do on the summative. All right, so those 3 purposes. And one of the goals, too, is to reduce stress on kids because it's the same kite system, it's the same items, that's no longer this big event at the end of the year if they've gone and done it several times during the year. It's just one more day. So that's the other goal behind it. And what we're really here to talk about today are the formative tools. And to me, this is the most exciting thing because this is about between a teacher and a student. This is not about how do we aggregate information up to give to the principal or give to a district person. This is about how do we get the teacher and student working together. So my colleagues behind me, Angela Broadus and Sarah Martin, are here to talk about each math and ELA, these ideas of tools built on our learning maps. So those of you who are familiar with dynamic learning maps know that there's an underlying theory about how kids learn. Well, we've taken those maps and made them even bigger to incorporate all kids and different learning styles. And now looking at figuring out where your kid is on that map and how to move them through the progression to get all of the knowledge and skills that they need by the end of the school year. So they're going to talk about some of the instructional resources available. One of the big things with formative, and people call it formative assessment, I prefer formative resources or formative tools, because it's not just a test, it's actually very rarely about tests. It's about figuring out where your kid is and giving them tasks to improve a misconception or a lack of knowledge and then moving them along. So I wanted to give you just a quick overview of how this all fits into the big system, because where we end up now is one big balanced system that is based on the Kansas standards. It'll only be changing to the degree that our standards are changing through the current standards review process, and it's aligned with the Kansas goals for students. So it'll be one whole system that works together within our state. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to give you some more detail about the formative piece.
Hi, and we're really happy to be here because we've been working extremely hard over the last 2 years to transform the learning map into a tool that can be used by teachers. So we're going to talk to you about that, and we're going to talk to you about the specific materials that are already available to Kansas educators. So we work on a project that is focused entirely on formative assessment. And I have
that foster the conditions for improving student achievement, including online tools deliberately designed to support and inform personalized learning. In short, the learning map model helps teachers adjust instruction to increase student achievement. So, how do you, as a teacher, assess all students in order to meet individualized learning needs? Enhanced Learning Maps resources help teachers tailor their instruction to meet individual students' needs so that all students may reach the highest levels of success. The Learning Map model, developed by the Enhanced Learning Maps project, allows teachers to examine the various smaller learning targets students must reach to achieve robust understanding of a particular topic. Teachers who partner with us will have advanced access to the Enhanced Learning Maps project's instructional resources. These resources provide teachers with an interactive graphic interface packed with research-based instructional tools to help them determine learning goals, develop instructional activities, collect evidence of learning, and address learning needs. Teachers have flexibility in using these materials to assess student learning and inform instructional decisions. Teachers will also receive information about how to adapt or generate their own learning maps-based assessment tools. Enhanced Learning Map staff are seeking a limited number of willing teachers to participate. We are specifically seeking those who teach students in grades 2 to 8 who are open to working together, trying new approaches, implementing research-based instructional materials, and reflecting on their instruction. Teachers will receive professional development and will be compensated for their feedback. Are you ready to partner with us and expand your teaching possibilities? Apply now by emailing enhancedlm@ku.edu or visit our website at enhancedlearningmaps.org.
Okay, so that little video told you a little bit about the kind of work we do, but what we're going to talk about today are materials that are already available broadly in Kansas. So there's a slight distinction, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on that today. My colleague behind me is Sarah Martin, so together we are going to lead this project. I've been working primarily on math, and Sarah will talk about ELA. So each of us has significant teaching experience in our particular content areas, and we're very, very happy to have the opportunity to work on things that we really think teachers will find useful, and we hope to be able to collaborate directly with a number of teachers to get their feedback. So our talk today will be around a few themes. What is formative assessment? Mary Ann talked a little bit about that. But we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. We're going to talk about organized learning models as they relate to what the learning map is, what is informed instruction, and then about our specific materials. And then we hope to invite you to evaluate, or not evaluate, but examine some of the samples that are already available on the kansasassessments.org website. So as Mary Ann talked a minute ago, summative, interim, and formative can make up a very nice system of assessments that can drive instruction, but we're here today to talk about this bottom piece that we believe should happen all the time, every day, every minute. It is a process that can be used to adjust instructional decisions. So these notes begin to get at our perspective. We believe that formative assessment is a process that occurs during instruction. It should be used to gauge where students are in their learning. And throughout the process, teachers should provide feedback to students that is focused on the differences between their current state of knowledge and the learning goal. And by using this process, we hope teachers will also gather information that can be used to adjust their instruction. So our perspective on formative assessment is that this process includes teachers and students as the key players. As such, it is really difficult for any external body to create supply formative assessments, but our project aims to provide instructional resources that may assist teachers in setting the conditions for effective formative assessment. So get the kids talking, listen to what they're saying, think about what that means in terms of their level of understanding. You see, the key is to elicit evidence of student thinking, which is a hard thing to do. But it can be quickly evaluated to see where kids are in their learning and determine what they need next. To do this, teachers might need supportive tools that include suggested activities with guiding questions, checks for understandings, and our materials are designed specifically to provide those kinds of supports. So even though there are only 2 bubbles here, we're going to talk a little bit about how our materials should supply tools for the entire process. When I first showed this slide to Sarah, she said, "Are people going to know what those words mean?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a really good question. I hope so, but I'm going to talk about them just in case. So several authors have started talking about various different kinds of learning models. Margaret Heritage, Jim Popham, Dylan William all talk about how a theory of learning, if it's positioned centrally in the mind of an educator, can really be very effective. They write about how formative assessment suggests that using a learning theory to inform your choices, if you employ a learning theory to inform your curricular choices, your instructional strategies, and your assessments, that can be very effective. Learning theories have been organized in different ways for about 50 years. In 1968, Gagne introduced learning hierarchies, which were pretty strictly hierarchical in that he modeled strict relationships between prerequisites, advocating kind of a theory of a kind of a mastery learning theory. Using a hierarchy, one could carefully address the prerequisite relationships and set students up for success. Progressions have gotten very popular in the last couple of years, as have trajectories, particularly in math and science. You hear the word progression more for science, and they can be arranged in a couple of different ways. Trajectories in mathematics have been advocated by Clements and Sarama and a few others. But a learning progression is sometimes linear, laying out an effective sequence. Progressions can also be modeled in a matrix form where you have different dimensions of learning along the top and then different levels of understanding along the side. Those are very popular in science. And then the cells describe student thinking at different levels along the different dimensions. When we set out to build our learning map, we looked at these other models, and that was 5 years ago now. But we felt that those models were they lacked the granularity that we thought would be useful for instruction, and some of them didn't allow for the multiple learning pathways that students in the entire population might navigate. So the learning map is different from these other types of models in that it's highly granular, and the multiple pathways really do permit students to navigate from point A to point B in a multitude of different ways. So we believe that networks offer us insight into how different things are connected in a variety of ways and offer a lot of opportunity for differentiation and meeting students' needs at any given moment in their learning. So as you heard a few minutes ago in the MTSS session, the map was originally built to support the dynamic learning maps assessment. And as Mary Ann said, we've worked quite a bit over the last 2 years to expand its representativeness of the general population of students. So it's getting bigger and bigger and more complex. So another project led us to making an interface that would be usable by teachers. And we've actually included Kansas teachers in conversations about what that interface should look like and what are their favorite tasks they would do in such an interface, what information is important to them, what information is not so important to them. So 2 years ago, we worked on the interface, and we included those teachers. And the teachers from that project said, oh, the map's great, but it's not enough. I want more than the map. I want ideas for instruction. I want to know what the misconceptions are. I want to know what incorrect work looks like, and what is the cause. So last year at this time, we developed a proposal that is funding new work to develop exactly those materials. And that's what we're here to talk about. We have, I don't even know how many right now, but we've been working at the standard or multiple standard level to create packages of materials that support instruction of a small section of a learning map. And everybody working on our team has years in the classroom and the advantage of experiences with real students. So we really think that we are building things that are useful And we also really want feedback to inform the improvement of those materials over time. So we believe that the learning map can really help teachers, not only because we're attaching resources, but we think that the map is an effective organizer to guide instruction and formative assessment. We think that it will help teachers recognize relationships within their content area that maybe they hadn't thought about before. And to think about prerequisite relationships. That's the big thing we hear from teachers over and over is, oh wow, I can crawl back in the learning map and understand possibly what my students are missing or why they're struggling. So they really like this idea of being able to know what the fine-grained prerequisites might be. So a key component of our new work is that we envision partnering with teachers in a way where we invite their constructive feedback and we'll use it to make improvements to the map and the materials. So while we hope we provide useful things, we in turn want to improve those products over time, and we're not constrained by the same constraints that affect summative assessment. We on the other hand, really can alter the materials if teachers don't find them useful. So we are very, very open and seeking teacher feedback, and we hope you will encourage your teachers to communicate with us when they try things out. Okay. I'm going pretty fast. It's a lot of information. So we think the learning map can also inform formative assessment very naturally. Teachers who take a minute to examine the fine-grained steps students need to navigate may do a few little things differently that make that lesson a little bit more effective, and that might be all it takes for 10 of the students in the room. That's fantastic. Additionally, we think that the awareness of learning sequences and supporting skill networks will help teachers make better sense of what they hear students say and what they see them do. So it really should foster a platform where teachers can be thinking, oh, when he said that, it made me think of that note I saw on the learning map, or it made me think of that sentence in the instructional plan that told me to be listening for that kind of understanding. So we're really hoping to scaffold that process of professional noticing that happens during the class session. Lessons planned with learning maps can clarify learning goals by making explicit the concepts and skills that contribute to mastery. We believe they can promote effective learning by focusing on connections, because we know that if students connect their understanding of one topic to another topic, the likelihood of their recalling it all together really increases. And we believe that the learning maps can provide a scaffold for interpreting student work, which is a key component of formative assessment. So here we go. There's our formative assessment cycle given to us by Margaret Heritage. And we're going to put the learning map right in the middle, because we really think that it can serve as an organizing foundational structure that informs the entire process. Specifically, we are building similar types of resources for ELA and mathematics. Notice that they're both going to have learning map information, teacher notes. Teacher notes are fantastic. We're going to have you look at one later in the session. Teacher notes are intended to provide teachers with a little glimpse of the literature that supports the learning map structure and also informed the development of whatever lessons and student activities come in that unit. So it will be like just excerpts from things like the mathematics teacher or mathematics teaching for middle school, or what's an ELA journal? Teacher facing.
The English journal.
Okay. So we are hoping to provide kind of filtered access to that information where teachers aren't necessarily required to go find it on their own. But for each teacher notes document, we will provide a nice little bibliography, so if they want more information, they can go get it. We hope that this really bridges research and practice, which has been a challenge to the education community for a long time. Instructional activities are lessons that can be used with whole groups of students. They can be used in a level 2 intervention. They could be used with individual students. However, when we write them, we're thinking about whole group instruction. So we hope that some teachers will find them useful in those ways. Student activities are where things are going to begin to vary. And Sarah's going to talk specifically about ELA in a few minutes, and I'll talk specifically about math. In the math, and then we each provide some sort of interpretive guide where teachers can look at student work in the presence of learning map information, and we're trying to scaffold how they review that student work so it takes their thinking back to the theory implied by the learning map. So here's our beautiful slide. The learning map informs instructional resources, and those resources impact formative assessment. So we hope this whole system, microsystem for formative assessment is going to help teachers in creating the conditions and helping students close their learning gaps. Do you want to say anything before I move on? Okay. Are there any general questions? Because now we're getting ready to go into the examples. Okay. So here's an example for one of the 8th grade functions standards. Do we have any mathies in the room? Math people? Math people. Just a few. Okay. All right. So math folks are keenly aware that a lot of the algebra content that used to be taught in 1st and 2nd years of high school is now in 8th grade. And this is one such standard where students are supposed to interpret the meaning of all the pieces of the equation y equals mx plus b. And this map lays out for teachers what that means based on teacher input that we use to help create such maps. The red nodes in this map are nodes that have been judged to directly align to this standard, and the blue nodes have been identified by teachers or our staff to be important nodes for teachers to consider while they are teaching or as part of their planning. So some maps are quite large. So this is one standard, and the unit for this standard actually covers 3 standards. So the map that is relevant to all of the instruction we've written is, I don't know, 25 nodes. It's pretty big. But this little one applies to this single standard. So if we zoom into the 2 nodes at the bottom, the goal of the instruction is for the student to be able to analyze linear functions and recognize, a prerequisite to that is to recognize properties of functions. And this is more information that comes in that learning map document, because those words on the left aren't really enough to tell the teacher what we meant. So the learning map document and software allow teachers to see more information about what each node really means about student thinking and learning. We're going to go through these examples kind of quickly because our activity is to have you go through the examples that are available on the website. And then so you can have your own experience while we're here to answer your questions. So in the teacher notes, we try to, like I said earlier, we try to bring to teachers a little bit of the insights that we've read in the literature. So if you read 1 or 2 of the bold sentences, it's lessons from research about how students learn this content and how it can be taught effectively. The instructional activities are fleshed out series of lesson plans that teachers can use to teach the material modeled in the learning map. In this case, recall the learning goal was to compare function or analyze functions. One of the prerequisites to, I'm on the wrong slide. No, I'm not. Okay. So hence the activity will support students in examining properties of 2 functions at a time while providing them experiences with multiple representations. And if you're not a math person, I'm sorry, you don't know what I'm talking about. But imagine this. The students get a card with the graph on the right and the table on the left. And these little word boxes are actually slips of paper or laminated, they're playing cards that students can use to describe the features of each function. So it's a different function on the left than it is on the right, but I know for a fact that this is a prioritized standard, and I think it's probably very hard for students to do in an early algebra experience. So this gives them some sort of concrete and hopefully collaborative experience working out what it means to be a linear function, what it means to have a smaller y-intercept, what it means to have a constant rate of change, and so on. So throughout the lesson plan, we also include questions that teachers could use to get students talking. We have two styles of questions in math. One of them is to elicit student thinking, and the other is to check for understanding on specific nodes. So you'll see those throughout the lessons. The student activities are usually follow or mirror what was done with the class, but they're intended for students to complete individually. So we're trying to partner group work with individual work so teachers have a host of tools for evaluating where students are. One of the really sweet things about the tools is the solution guide. It's pretty common to provide the correct answer, and we're doing that. It's not so common to give you a whole bunch of wrong answers and to give you ideas of, okay, so the student might have made this error, which is in the left column. The misconception that student holds could be this middle column information. And the node in the learning map that may be the culprit or the place the student needs to revisit is listed on the right. And we'll expand on this as we hear from teachers. And we also know we need to scaffold that just a little bit more so the teacher has an action plan for what do I do if the kid is in row 2 of this table. So we will be working on that over the next few years, and that's another area where we would love to root our work in actual teacher experiences, which means we need feedback. Because we're not in the classroom anymore, but you have thousands of teachers who are. So if we get their feedback and can root those suggestions in what they say, that will make these materials that much more powerful. And I'm going to turn this over to Sarah.
Okay. Hello, I'm Sarah Martin, and I am the ELA project lead on this project. How many of you have ELA experience? Like, that's the bulk of your experience? Okay, so quite a few people. So our ELA lesson sets are similar to math in the way they're developed. But we all know that math and English is taught a little bit differently. So I'm going to go through this so quickly so we can get on to the activities, because I think you're really going to learn more about what these are all about if you actually see the lesson sets. So in ELA, we have the standard 3.1, ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text, referring explicitly to the text as the basis for the answers. So what we want kids to do is ask and answer questions. This map is the constellation of skills that students may progress through in order to finally meet this red learning target. So it's a really helpful tool for teachers to have. Same thing, we have, same thing as math, we have the standard node, which is in red, and then the precursor skill. So this is just so you can kind of see what's actually in the map. We have the same thing here. So we provide teachers with the map view, but also a separate node description table so you can read through. Math and ELA are a little bit different in that ELA's descriptions are not as truncated as math, so you can pretty much get the gist of what the node is by looking at the actual map. Teacher notes, same thing. So we also use research to inform our instruction. So for instance, the research says that using prompts to, giving prompts to students helps them know how to ask questions. So giving them generic stems like what, where, how, that's actually in the research. So we include that in our lesson sets. So what I love about these lesson sets is that it's really a true way to bridge research and practice. And that is something that is truly exciting for me as a teacher in the classroom for over a decade. Same thing here, we have a learning goal for each lesson. So for ELA 3. RI 3.1, we have 3 lessons that teach that one standard. So we have a lesson for ask questions, we have a lesson for answer questions, and then we have a 3rd lesson that combines ask and answer. In the lesson set, in each lesson we provide it's just a lesson plan. So the instructional activity just gives you step-by-step details for how to conduct that lesson. So for each one, we provide an activity that creates the conditions for you or your teachers to notice how the student is progressing through the constellation of skills. We also provide, so for instance, one of the activities is the student is creating questions using the question stems, and so the teacher circulates and observes how the student is progressing through the skill of asking a question using question stems. The student writes it down in a provided handout, so we provide the handout for teachers so they don't have to create it themselves, which is great. And then we have an answerer who answers the question so the teacher can observe how the students are doing both asking and answering. And then we also provide actual questions that the teacher can ask the student to see where they are on the progression level. So for instance, we give them a question, can you point to 3 different question creating approaches that you used in your question? So the teacher's walking around, she's circulating, and she can actually either post this question, she can ask it, she can give it to the students ahead of time. There are lots of different uses for these checking for understanding questions. So in a nutshell, that's the ELA. We are in the process of developing the independent student practice and the solution guide. So we're still considering how to sort of modify the solution guide, because as you know in ELA, there's not a true solution to these things. There's more of a progression. So we want to provide a tool for you that's easy for you to be able to diagnose the levels of understanding, both on the individual level and the class level. And that's really important too. So we're developing that. ELA got a little later start than math, so you'll see that when you get to the actual activities. So, okay, that's it. So we're going to move on to the activity, which I will turn back over to Angela. Thank you so much.
Do you have internet access? Oh, excellent. So if you could visit kansasassessments.org and click on the Formative tab at the top. There's new text there that we invite you and your teachers to read that really goes back to those early slides that we shared about our perspective on formative assessment. We believe there are still people out in the field in all states, not only in Kansas, but everywhere, who cling to an idea of formative assessment being testing and using scores to make decisions about group progress. But we would encourage you to re-examine how your teachers view formative assessment using the text that's provided there. So if you, at the bottom of the page, there should be a link, Explore Formative Tools or something along those lines, and that should land you here. And this is a page that describes the types of resources that are available to teachers and the standards that we've worked on thus far. So, and I think before this time you probably had the opportunity to choose math or ELA. Does anyone have a question about access yet? Okay. So if we go through, so what we're going to try to do is we have, I don't know, we'll take about another 10 minutes, and hopefully in groups where you're seated, you can start looking at one thing at a time. And we have specific questions we'd love for you to consider. So if you pull up one of the learning maps, and what we failed to do today was show you how to navigate. So this is kind of a little experiment. I wonder how intuitive those learning map pictures are. you should be able to click in the nodes. Maybe I'm going to have to demo
I
that.
have an urge to circulate. I'm not going to,
Go.
but I have the urge to.
Okay. Do you want me to get out of the PowerPoint and go show you how to navigate? Yes, okay. That was a failure on our part to conclude that. Because we do it all the time. You know those things you do all the time that you don't realize other people don't know? Okay, so this is, I clicked on 8.23, or so that 8.f.23, just to have a consistent example with what we talked about earlier. So what we've done here, this is very cool for Kansas. We are imitating the actual learning map, but only one standard group at a time, so it's not too overwhelming for teachers. So there are probably, I don't know, 100 different actions you can take in this image. And one of them is to click on a plus sign on one of the nodes, and that should get you the missing prerequisite shown in gray. Another thing you can do is click on one of these dotted lines, and that will show you all the intermediate node names that exist on that connection. So teachers really do have access to pretty large sections of the map just by exploring these little pictures. And then we have full screen and reset the view. So if a plus sign is available, if the node has more prerequisites that are not showing, then the plus, maybe I have to go back. The plus sign should show up. So I think, is that the same one I clicked on before? No. Okay, so that time I added 3 new nodes to my view. And I know you can't read them here, but teachers can go to full screen. They can also zoom in and out just like you can on your phone. I'm just scrolling on my trackpad. So the map itself can be a very useful tool. I would have to open the learning map information to get at that table. So we encourage you to go to these links, and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint so I can get at our questions. So for learning map information, we'd like you to start thinking about what information is useful and how my teachers use it. We're going to give you like a minute or a minute and a half to do that task. And then we're going to go to another task, because I know we're the last thing and you just want to leave and go home. It's a beautiful day outside. But do take a minute or a minute and a half and share with your colleagues what you think about the learning map. I shouldn't have said it was a beautiful day. So are you still in learning map, or did you zoom ahead without us? It's slow. Okay, then can you just start sharing? What do you think is useful about the learning map for teachers? Is there something that we didn't think on our own? Oh, that's an interface thing. If you click on the hourglass, it should put that node in the middle and give you an image of that node with its parents, its children, and its grandparents and grandchildren. Sorry I left that out. But yeah, that's kind of a cool little feature. I know. Okay, so that's a good segue. So we're going to move forward. So if you open the teacher notes, and you can be thinking about the learning map at the same time, because our key question here is, how would you structure a little professional development session, maybe around one standard or one of these units, to discuss what the teacher notes said, and maybe you'd go into the map at that time, but give us some ideas about how you would do that, because that's what we don't have direct access to, and we would love your feedback about. So one thing I just heard was, this is hard to do. This kind of PD is very difficult to do with teachers. Is that true for many of you? Because it's content specific, it's rich, it's important. So what you can tell us after you leave, next week or the next month, whenever, is what can we build for you? Do we need to hold a webinar just for you guys? Would a training video help? So please go back, because we are very, very open to that kind of feedback. Yes?
Our math curriculum already has embedded videos for each standard or topic when you teach. And so they can go in and watch it as they need to. In the first couple of years, you watch it, and then you back off on that. So if you just take your teacher notes and create that into a video that teachers can use as needed.
That's already
Because it's up to the teacher. Then at that point in time, you have the big overall, these are standards, this is how we teach, this is our curriculum, but now you're getting ready to teach this standard. Go in and watch the video either with your PLC or on your own as you're getting ready to teach it. So it's just in time and just when they need it.
Yeah, we already, that's already on the agenda. It's a scary thing for us, because we don't create videos on a regular basis, but if any of you know what the CCQs look like for the high school, what's it called? CPAS program. We're kind of looking at that format as it gives a kind of a PowerPoint presentation with a little person's face giving the talk. But thank you for that suggestion. I'm glad to hear that it is something that works. Okay, we're really not going to go through all of these, because I know you're losing interest and you're tired and you just want to go home. But we encourage you to, okay.
So my question is about pacing, because it's huge, and it's huge right now when we give state assessment, and it's all fair game, and it's huge in everything we do in our classrooms and what the realities are. And so my question is, these what you've provided here works great, because I can use it when we're there, and we may be in the same sort of general progression as where the superstars at Shawnee Heights are, but we're 3-4 weeks behind that. So there is some common ways these chapters unfold, especially math. ELA, not so much. My question is, how's the assessment design going to tie in? Is it going to be tied in like this so it can be really flexible and we can use it when we're there? Or if you start chunking off for 4 assessments in a year, all of a sudden you're starting to determine pacing for people. And then if that's the case, have you done big giant surveys across the state to see what the most typical pacing is of this content? So if it's in small chunks and we just use the chunks, then we have a lot of latitude to organize those where we encounter the teaching and our curriculum pacing that. But
Okay.
those are completely different places.
Okay, So I'm a little confused, but I will try to address what I think may help you answer your question. So we put together relatively small units. This is 3 standards together, and I think we even say here, no, not this one. We believe we're trying to look at a unit that would take a week to 2 weeks to teach, nothing bigger than that. But so in this case, you could download each lesson individually. But when in this particular case, this student activity, which is kind of like an assessment component, will draw on all 4 lessons. In other units, the student activity is easier to divide up, and we've done that. So you could divide up the different pieces. Is that getting at
It is, but it isn't. So hang on, I think your colleague maybe can,
Okay.
you want to speak to it?
Well, so the way I understand your question is, if I were a teacher, I want to teach asking and answering questions. I might want to teach it throughout the year, or I might want to teach it in April, or I might want to teach it in February, or whenever. What our assessments help you do is the lessons are attached to one standard, exactly. So you can,
okay. No, this is not, we're not connected to that at all.
yeah.
How it fits?
So when you get to the interims, then the question is, what kind of surveying have you done?
Mary Ann can answer that question.
To make sure that there is some reasonable pacing to what goes on. There's quite a bit of commonality among us, but it would be good to know that, and that would need to be made clear way ahead of time, probably even before the assessments were done.
So we actually don't insist on any kind of pacing. That's part of what we're trying to do with interim assessments, is I don't believe in telling teachers how everybody should teach in what order and at what time of year. So you've taught this series of things and you want to go in and create assessments. What the interim does is it has what we call the mini test. So the test will have between 5 and 8 items for a target, and it will let you put together the assessment the way you want. So we'll gather information as we go along if there are common knowledge where we can help people. And we're also looking at developing tools where teachers, if we see teachers putting together the same testlets, we'll just create that testlet and name it something that'll be useful to teachers so they don't have to go through that step. You can save them yourself, yes, exactly. So what right now the system, well, by fall the system will do for you is you can create a test, save it yourself, call it whatever you want. The place we're going to play with is, do you want to be able to share it with teachers across your school, across your district? That's the place we still need to implement to see if that would be useful. Yeah, and I think because part of what we're doing here, and just to go back to Angela's last comment, it's not completely separate. I mean, the idea of, to me, it's grain size. So one example I give in, Angela gave me to give, in our summative assessment, you'll get score reports that say things like, you have an incoming student who is doing poorly in base 10 operations with fractions. And the interim assessment will say they're really struggling with the targets about adding and subtracting fractions. Then you can move to your formative system, click on the nodes around that area, and come to find out, working with your kid, what they really don't know how to do is find common denominators. And so once they find the common denominators, they can work with the tools Angela is developing, work on that. They can either work with the teacher or work by themselves through the instructional materials, but figure that out. Then the teacher can reassess them on the interim assessment in the whole idea of fractions, base 10, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a math person. And see if they've now got it. And now they'll do well on the summative. Yes.
So I think that's an awesome design, and what I like you said too is the summative assessment is going to have enough detail at that standards, or really like in math, we would probably even be able to call that a cluster level, that then we have some data to know how to plan ahead for kids. Because if we get that data when we get it, because those clusters tend to run through, like there's a break between sixth grade and 8th grade in high school math. There's some breaks in there where it switches over, but by the standards. But anyway, I think that is good design. We can work with it. I don't think everybody's going to use that to teach with, but it's still great support, the materials. But but it's great to have it there, and for some people who need that, that's awesome. Thank you.
And maybe I'm misunderstanding what this does. What would be helpful for us spent many, many hours building pacing guides in our district, and what would be really helpful is if there was a way then to go in, even at the district level, to be able to pull the standards that we have in each quarter into an assessment, and then everyone takes that assessment, we're able to look at the data and then plan to make sure we're getting everything in before state assessments. Will this be able to do that?
I think that's closer to what Mary Ann just described about the interim assessment tool, for two reasons. One, the customization of pulling items in, but the other reason that the interim assessment tool is more appropriate for that is the idea of aggregation. The formative assessment that we recommend is not intended for aggregation so much. It's really intended for diagnosing pockets of needs. But we hope that the system supports all of its arms. So what we hope this will help teachers do is increase their understanding of student learning and help them foster solid, personalized instruction in their classrooms. And then the interim assessment can be used more as a programmatic tool with some variation. The lessons can be, yes. But you're hinting at something that would be useful feedback. So suppose you have 8 or 10 teachers in a large district, or 2 or 3 teachers in a small district. Try some of these things out. Letting us know, hey, that student assessment is just too big. We need it broken up into 4 chunks. We can do that, and we are happy to do that. So that's exactly the tone of the feedback, or we'll take anything. But making the tools into things that your teachers want to use is 90% of why we're doing this work. So please, please, please encourage them. So there is a link, I didn't put this in a slide, and I should have. On the formative assessment webpage where we just had you visit, there should be a text box in the upper right-hand corner that says, for help, go to CETE_formative_help at ku.edu. I'll say it again. CETE_formative_help at ku.edu. And that email comes to our team and bypasses all of the stuff about summative and interim assessment. So it comes directly to the people who are creating these materials. We have our own software developer. It's a tiny little team, but we do all of it. So those emails come directly to us and should be kind of a straight shot for you or your teachers. So we invite you to try these resources, particularly the last few weeks of school, have teachers in there. They could be trying stuff for the next grade level. But we really, really hope that you will enjoy the resources and that we expand the library by August so that you have even more options to choose from. So, are there any other questions? I know I didn't get all the way done, but that's okay.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
So before we close, I kind of want to go back to the slide that Mary Ann started with, where you have the summative, then you have some interims, and you have some formatives. Our goal or our focus right now is, yes, there is a summative by state and federal statute. But we have some flexibility now in what we want to do with the results of that, but more importantly, what can we do throughout the year that is not part of any accountability system, but it's what we want to do in Kansas that aligns to what your teachers are wanting, you're wanting throughout the year. So we'll be bringing that group back, the KCCRAC, crack committee, and just having a conversation about what is it we want. Let's get it set, and then we'll move forward. Last thing I just wanted to mention, and I put these on a chair on the way out the door. This summer, we have 2 impact institutes. One's in Emporia, one's in Hayes. When Randy talked about the outcomes and all the initiatives around civic engagement, and kindergarten readiness, and individual plans of study, those are what we'll be working on this summer. It is a great opportunity, especially for your teachers. The way we try to orchestrate it is, if we have revenue, we always budget to lose money on the annual conference. We've had more people show up every year. We take what we have from that, and we put it right back in. I think it's like, how much? 25 bucks? Right, for the Impact Institute. Yeah, you may have to put them up in a room, stack them high, whatever you need. But I think it's a great opportunity for you to be able to send you or some of your staff 25 bucks a person. How many days? 2 days? And they're really going to get into these initiatives that we truly want to focus on more and about moving forward. So grab one of those on your way out. We hope to see, again, we've got one at Emporia this summer and one out at Hayes. If we continue to get more attendance, because the people who are presenting are you. I mean, the people out in the field that are doing really great things, they're the ones that come and present on these things. So with that, anything in closing? A lot of stuff today, a lot of stuff, but all I can say is hang in there. I know the issues that you're having are the same issues we are, and that is what's next. Our number one priority has got to be taking care of our colleagues and our kids. Our kids, these are all adult issues. They look to us to keep them charged and keep moving. Our colleagues, the people that you see in your offices and in your hallways, we got to continue to keep them motivated. I always believe the pendulum swings over time. I think it hit and it's coming back. And I don't know how long it takes, but I think the right conversations are happening with education in Kansas. George? You got a track meet to get to? Everybody's got a track meet to get to. All right, thanks everybody.